We have the great privilege of having Casey, one of the Happy Hormones graduates, here today, sharing her story of how she overcame 8 years of dealing with endometriosis, infertility, and immense pain around her kids. So, Casey, thank you so much for taking the time to be on here today and just to share a little bit of your journey that I know will help inspire and encourage other women just like you. Because I think a lot of times, like when we're seeing somebody share, their story or their journey, we think, oh, that could only be them. Like that doesn't apply to me and my circumstances or my complicated medical history. And so I wanted you to share because you have quite a story. And I know that it's going to encourage and really just inspire other women who might be kind of where you were before we started working together and before we started kind of addressing these issues. So, would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and where you were, let's say, like 4 or 5 months ago before we started working together? Take off my glasses.
Sure. Absolutely. I guess my story kind of begins when I guess about 8 years ago now, when they removed an ovary and a fallopian tube, and then after that, I was never like fully right, and went through like a lot of infertility issues and fertility doctors, and the doctors all said, like, not going to have any children. It's just not going to happen. You have a very low chance. And then I actually had one doctor tell me that in a physical, she was like, I don't think that's really true. I think it's just your hormones. So I started looking into hormones and what all of that looked like. And I actually did another program, like not this one, but it was very
Mhm.
weight driven. It was to lose weight. It was
Okay. Yeah.
very heavy on supplements, like creams, like hormone creams. Like it was just something that I don't feel like I could really sustain financially. So it was just a really big
Right.
kind of a letdown, because like I lost a lot of weight. I lost about 35 pounds on that program, and like I learned a lot about my body at that time. And I went back to the doctor, and I kept saying, like, I have these really heavy periods, I have these really intense cramps, I'm not really sleeping very well. It's just something that, like, there's still something that's missing.
Right.
And at that time, they actually found, I ended up in the ER. They found a endometrioma in
Okay.
my uterus, and they said, one of the only options to get rid of that is surgery or birth control, like to kind of lessen, like, because it was a 7 centimeter endometrioma, like it wasn't a small little thing in there. Um, so I ended up going with the surgery. They removed all of the endometrioma that I had. I ended up being diagnosed with endometriosis after the surgery. Um, they had they told me like my only option was to go on birth control to like
Mhm.
even lessen some of the symptoms that I was having, like.
Right.
And endometriosis is a very like kind of stubborn thing that just doesn't
Right.
really go away. So I started looking into some natural ways, and that's kind of how I found this program. Just more so because like you shouldn't have pain like on your periods
Right.
at all. And like I had such intense cramps. I
Yep.
had like, and it wasn't always at my period. It was like
Right.
sometimes in the middle of it, sometimes in the middle of my cycle, sometimes just randomly. And like it just, you shouldn't have that. You shouldn't have,
Right.
nobody should deal with that kind of pain.
Right.
So that's kind of where that's kind of how I found this program, because it relied more on natural, like your natural ability um to help alleviate your symptoms.
Right.
So
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
love that. And I totally forgot about the other program that you did. And I remembered when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, we had that conversation.
Yeah.
Because it really, one, you're in a unique position because you've already tried so many things, right? And so I think there's that automatic, maybe you didn't feel this way, but I think there's that automatic kind of thought process of like, okay, but I've already done so many things. How could this really be different? And my medical situation is so complex that every doctor I talk to is telling me it's not resolvable, and or I'm not going to get that result that I want. And so you end up feeling like, okay, do I really just have to surrender to living in pain all the time? Or is there really something else that we can do differently? And so, it's one of the reasons why I do think that the Happy Hormones program is so successful is because we address the root issues. Now, endometriosis, just for those of you, who don't know, whether it's an endometrioma or endometriosis or, anywhere in that spectrum, is essentially estrogen dominance that creates tissue growth in tissues. So for a woman, that would be the uterus, or the ovaries, or surrounding, like, the surrounding tissues. And so when we address the reason why a person has estrogen dominance, primarily because the liver detox pathways are not opening up properly, then whether or not you have estrogen dominance that just gives you sore breasts before your period, or you have, abnormal tissue growth, that is, when we address that issue, it resolves all of it. Um, and so we're really working with you individually to say, okay, how do we get you, Casey, to that end goal of painless periods? Because you're right, you shouldn't be having pain before your period. And everybody who's worked with me knows that, like, you shouldn't have pain, because it's not normal. And so I just wanted to make sure, when you were in that place, having tried everything that you had done before, what kept you motivated? Like, what kept you kind of moving forward? Because I think that's something that a lot of women struggle with. Not, and it's not for lack of trying. It's just that typically they feel like, I've tried everything, so what's the point? So what do you feel like for you kind of kept your hope alive?
I think a lot of it was the fact that I had already tried so many other things. Like I was just I don't feel like I could have done it on my own.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like I needed that person that believed in me, that kept saying, keep going. It's, like, this will work out for you. Um and honestly, in the support of my husband and family, like, they were huge. Because a lot of times, like, you want to pick up a brownie and eat a brownie for dinner, and
Yep.
that's not, I mean, it's not good for anybody, but like, a lot of it was like changing your mindset to, like,
Right.
okay, I'm gonna fuel my body and not, like, feed it with disease, I feel like, is
Yep.
what I was in the back of my mind.
Right.
So that was just kind of a huge thing. And knowing and hearing a lot of the outcomes of people saying they don't have cramps during their period, and I'm like, is this, like, for real? So that, I feel like,
Yeah.
I needed, it was almost like I needed to see it for myself. So that's kind of what
Yep.
kept me motivated and kept me going. And it
Right.
wasn't a lot, like, there wasn't a lot of extra supplements that I had to go out and buy and get.
Right.
And it was just because I feel like that was the downfall from the other program, is that it was so heavy, like, you needed so many other supplements, and
Mhm.
it was like over
Right.
$200 a month, and, like, you can't sustain that. Like, yeah, I guess some people can, but, like, I couldn't justify, like, that
Right.
kind of spending. And I know it's like I'm spending money on my health, but at the same time, I'm like, why do I need all of these supplements? So it was kind of getting to the, like, these are all still kind of band-aids. Um, so that's what
Yep.
I kind of really liked about this one, is that there wasn't a lot of
Yeah.
need for supplements.
Totally. Well, and that was my biggest frustration personally when I was walking through all of my hormone stuff. I'm like, I can't spend like $300 a month for the rest of my life. Like, supplements, in my personal and professional opinion, should be used to supplementally fill the gap, but eventually they should shift the physiology and you should not need them anymore. And so that's why it's like, okay, if we're going to, recommend a certain supplement for something, it really should be short term, except for in the cases where we're using it to fill the gap of like what your body genetically can't do. That there's a difference there. But I think especially when we're talking about hormones, it for the majority of women, it is a band-aid. And so and it doesn't actually resolve the issues, which is why, 3 months later, women still end up feeling like, okay, I have like marginal improvement, like maybe marginal improvement, but not like the long-term improvement that I was hoping for. So I love that. And I love that you talked about recognizing for yourself that you couldn't do it on your own anymore. And I think for somebody as intelligent and independent and like go getter as you are, that at least for me, that's probably one of the hardest things for me to do, is recognize when it's time to lean back into somebody else's strength, right? Or lean back into their expertise and know and trust that they're going to get you to where you need to go. So, do you feel like, kind of in your experience, do you feel like your experiences with the medical community that were negative before, do you feel like that carried in with you at all to, our working process? Did you have a little bit of that, like, is she for real? Kind of in the background of your mind? Do you
Uh,
think? I'm just
yeah,
curious.
I was gonna say, so yes and no. Like at the very beginning, it was kind of like, is this too good to be true? Is this really going to work?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel it, and I felt like that about my other program as well. Like it's one of those that you just don't,
Mm-hmm.
like you're starting something new, you don't know exactly what's going to happen. But I've had so many
Right.
doctors and so many people like in the medical community just tell me, like you have infertility issues, you have this, you have that. Like it's normal for your periods to be like, for you to
Right.
have cramping during your period. And I'm like, but why? Like, why is it normal? Like that shouldn't be normal. And then they always push
Not
birth
normal.
control.
Yeah.
Like, and it was always birth control.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's their solution. It was always birth control. It doesn't, like they wouldn't
Right.
run hormone panels, they wouldn't test thyroid, like they wouldn't test any, like I really had to be like an advocate
Right.
to like see, like, is this my thyroid? Is it, like, because a lot of the symptoms I was originally having, like, pointed to a thyroid issue. Well, they came back normal, like within
Yeah.
normal levels. So it's just one of those,
Totally.
like it was like, do you like, I know, and that's probably the medical community in itself, is that, like this is what they know to do. And, birth control
Right.
is their solution. But I always, like, I started questioning, like, but why? Like, why is like, there's so many, like, if you read the side effects of birth control, like there's so many issues. And I'm like, why do people,
Right.
like continue on with this?
Yep.
And it's no wonder like so many people have issues getting pregnant, because like birth control, I feel like messed up your body.
Yep.
And so,
It
yeah.
does. And I will just tell you, you touched on something here that's really, I think, really powerful, because if you are working with a practitioner who does not appreciate your questions, like, and they get frustrated with you, well, just listen to me because I'm the expert, but they're
Mhm.
not actually willing to be like, why do we normalize that? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, that you need to find somebody who does, because those, it's kind of like my daughter's wired like that. And I'm kind of wired like that, where it's like I have this insatiable need to understand why. And because there are certain things, really, like just like you said, that shouldn't be tolerated, that we're tolerating because we've been told to, not because it's actually good for us. That would be like a chiropractor ignoring back pain, like, oh, I'm just in pain all the time. They say, oh yeah, that's normal. No, it's not normal. So why like why are we, there's a reason why women have pain, and it's inflammation, it's hormone overload, and sometimes it's endometriosis. So I think even you like having that tenacity to ask those better questions, and not in a mean way, but just like I just